Hi everyone, and welcome to the Season 2 playlist for self-employed estate agents. As you will have seen with some of the other episodes, I've got actual live operating self-employed agents on this particular season. I'm joined by Matt today. How are we doing?
I'm doing very well, Ian. Thank you very much.
One half of Matt and Ovi.
Yeah, exactly that. One half of Matt and Ovi in Binfield and Moorfield.
Yeah, no, it's been good. And we were just talking off camera that kind of in month 9 now. So this would be quite interesting for people watching and listening because you're inside your first year. You're in the toughest part of moving from employed to self-employed. So this question that I always ask everyone, kind of why take that leap of risk, if you like, financial risk from a career long of being employed into self-employed is probably right at the forefront of your mind at the moment, kind of in that first year. So what was the motivator to kind of leave where you were and go self-employed?
I've wanted to do this for a lot longer than when I actually did it. I think if we was to scale back from when I first spoke to you about it, it was probably a good few years before I actually took that leap. But I had other things going on, as in I wanted to buy a house and I remember saving for that deposit. And I remember having that deposit and thinking, I could use this to go self-employed in the very early days of Avocado. But I decided at the time, buy the house first, which I actually bought through Avocado as well. And then once I'd bought that house, I remember meeting with you again to sort of have that conversation. And I just needed to be in a position where I could. And ultimately, lots of things happened in the meantime, but I was in a position where I could. I thought it was right for the client. Something I believed in, reasonably early on. I was quite an early adopter of, I can see why the client would want that. And I can see how you could grow from doing that. And then once I could, and the patch came free, I think I joined within 6 weeks, ultimately. It was quite a quick, it's free, okay, let's join. And
it's a good point, because the model and the way Avocado, the brokerage, works is once we're committed to an agent in a particular location, then we're locked in with them and they're locked in with us, and we don't offer that same area to anyone else to compete against each other. It's very much a partnership in that style. The area in the patch that you would have wanted being kind of that Binfield, Warfield area was in the end taken by someone else, who she then decided that actually she wanted to go and do something part-time, set hours, leave the self-employed life, and actually she got married and life changed and just decided to do that. So you were probably, how were you actually feeling when the patch went and you didn't have the opportunity of seeing Binfield? What was going through your mind then? I've never asked you that question.
No, and I never really spoke about it, but gutted.
Yeah, okay.
And not because I'd have done anything differently, because I just wasn't ready at that time financially to take that plunge. But it was open for a reasonably long time. It was a patch that was available. And then obviously it got taken, and you think, there's nothing I can do. Yeah. As you've said, you're committed to that individual. I just have to wait and see. And I remember when I was feeling probably most disillusioned with estate agency in my previous role. And I remember thinking, I can't even just go and join Avocado. Like, that's how I felt. I remember when something happened that I thought, just not in line with what I'm thinking. And I thought, well, I can't even go and do that. So I was looking at other estate agencies at the time. Yeah. And then I was thinking, I don't think that'll be any different to what I'm experiencing at the moment. I think it'll be a new role. So you sort of go into it with a new set of eyes, and, you'll go through that process. But after 6 months, I'll be sat there going, no, employed estate agency still isn't for me.
Do you think that's why a lot of people get to 10, 15 years and just exit the industry?
Yeah.
How you were feeling? I felt the same, around the same sort of time, actually.
I was going to go and be a mortgage advisor. Like, there's the long and short of it. That was something that I was sat there thinking of doing. It's something that back in 2019, when I got qualified to do that, I went to do, and then I got made manager of the branch. Yeah. So I thought, okay, I'll stay a bit longer. And then COVID happened. And then I bought a house, and all these reasons why I wouldn't leave the industry.
There's always a reason.
But exactly that. I mean, I nearly fell down that wormhole ultimately of leaving the industry, which wouldn't have been right, because like, I love this job. The actual job of being an estate agent, I would have always missed that, having been trying to do something else. But yeah, I think that is why people get to that 10, 15 year, maybe sooner milestone, become disillusioned that perhaps they can't go any further without joining a big corporate where there's area manager roles, and then ultimately ending up going into doing something totally different.
I think a lot of people feel they fall out of love with the industry and they exit, and then they miss it and they go back. You see it a lot of time. I've seen it in the last 12 months with loads of our ex-colleagues where we work together that have gone into IT recruitment or IT sales and then recruitment, and then they come back because they missed it. And a lot of the time people fall out of love with the role or the business, but they don't fall out of love with the industry. And it's nice that there's now this opportunity for people to take a sidestep from a manager's role or an area manager's role into self-employed, and then almost start back at the bottom, which is probably how it feels in the first 9 months.
Yeah.
To then build the foundations up to something at a latter stage, which is going to be of benefit. So what surprised you as being the hardest in the first 9 months? What's been the thing where you're like, Jesus Christ, I didn't expect that to be that hard?
I've never really, I guess, put much thought into it because, and this might sound corny, but it's just been so much fun.
Okay.
I think, as you said, like bringing it back, there has been challenges of working 50-50 with a business mindset with somebody else. I guess because previously I was a branch manager, and I worked in a very small office with one other person.
Okay,
so, you know, to an extent, I had a reasonable amount of say in what happened day to day. And I think then going into a mindset of, I'm 50-50 with someone here, and although we do have the freedom to be able to do our own thing, you do still need to always be thinking of that other person.
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest challenge, to go from a manager's position to then total 50-50. But
Yeah.
it's been fun. So I wouldn't say it's been that challenging.
You share the highs and the lows, and you share the agreements and you share the disagreements.
Yeah, exactly that. On a 50-50 basis. So when you do have a disagreement, you do need to talk it through and work out exactly what happens. But the disagreements are very few and far between.
Me and my wife have a way of handling that situation, and we kind of, and I then shared that with Mike in the early days when we went into business together, and we then adopted it. And it was really simple. It was, if one of us agrees and the other one disagrees, we don't do it. Obviously, if we both disagree, we don't do it because neither of us want to do it. And if we both agree, we do it. And that way it just takes all of the drama out of it, because we've always agreed that if one of us wants to do it and the other one doesn't, we just don't do it, because it won't be right. There'll be conflict. There'll be an issue. So we both have to agree. And if we both agree, then we make the decision. But if one of us disagrees, it shouldn't be the holiday we go on, or the sofa that we buy, or the way we decorate the room, or the time's right to do the garden, or how to parent a kid, or whatever it may be. If we both don't agree, we don't make the decision. And the same applies with me and Mike in the relationship with Avocado. Yeah. If we want to drop something, but one of us wants to keep it, we keep it. If we want to bring something on, but one of us doesn't, we don't. So we have to both be aligned with it. And that is not always what you want, but it makes it acceptable in your own mind to go, okay, yeah, that's fine. That's what we've agreed.
And I think it avoids the resentment further down the line. If one of you wants to do it, doesn't want to do it, and you're doing something, there's always that risk.
Yeah. What's been the moment? Like, everyone's got a moment where they're like, oh, thank God I did this, or that's a magic moment. I always remember my client at Nettlecombe, the way they opened the door to me on completion day. There was just a particular moment that happened with me where my vendor's sister opened the door and said, Heather, the estate, someone's here at the door for you. And then Heather said, this is our estate agent, Ian, and introduced me as their estate agent rather than the estate agent, which was very rare. And actually for me, it was quite a moment where I was like, I'm actually their estate agent now. That was mine. What's been yours? Has there been multiple? Has there been one magic moment?
There's probably been a couple, but I think the first one was the first completion. Not because it was the first completion, but we met them at the house, presents, all the rest, stuff that you wouldn't do necessarily in a traditional high street estate agent, but met them there. Now they don't necessarily know they're our first one at this point. But I went to take their photo right outside the front, and he pulled me in and took a selfie with all of us there and then wrote this big review. I didn't ask him to do it, to say how much he enjoyed the process and everything else. And you think, in a normal high street estate agent, I'd never have been on that type of journey where they would feel the need to, pull me into the photo to take a selfie on the moment they've just got the keys. They've not even walked in the house at this point.
Yeah.
And they're doing that. And you think, this is just so different.
They're excited that you personally were there, not just the keys, but they're excited that you were there.
Exactly. And I think that was just such an eye-opening moment of how we're just on this journey in a different level.
Yeah.
And it might sound a bit corny from the outside looking in, but then once you're here and you're doing it, you realise we are on a different journey altogether to what you might have experienced previously. Yeah. And I think the second point was my second exchange. I think the first exchange is always good and exciting, but the second one that happened reasonably quickly after the first, in month 4, and you think, no, this is actually working. You think one happening, you think, okay, it is what it is. It's good. Yeah. And it was somebody that came to me that had dealt with me previously, and so was the second. And you think, okay, that's 2 in 1 month. I think the exchanges were actually in different months, but the completions were in the same month. And you just think, no, this is real. Yeah. This is actually happening. So I think the second one just felt so much more than the first one because it felt like, no, this is actually building now.
And I wonder, a question for you actually, because you were the first agents, because you'd spent so much time in Binfield as an agent and Ovi had spent so much time in Warfield as an agent, you were the first avocado agents where we put your faces on the boards in this local area, because we felt that was the right thing to do to show who it was, because you'd moved so many people. How did that feel? And have you had any feedback from any of the public? Has that helped in terms of people recognising what you're doing?
And it was something that I was a little bit apprehensive about doing. So I think, it's such a brave thing to do.
It's a bit of an ego play.
Yeah. And you always think the worst. You think, is someone going to deface it? Is someone going to do X, Y, Z? All the rest. But the amount of people that called me that I don't think would have called me had my face not been on there. And what I mean by that is they called me to say, oh, I'm not looking to do anything right now, but I realised that you've moved and X, Y, Z, how did that come about, blah, blah, blah. And it just opened the door to conversations that I perhaps wouldn't have been able to have. And they would have realised I'd moved eventually, but it just meant that everybody knew I'd moved reasonably quickly. It helped as well that we had a sponsorship event about 2 weeks after the boards had arrived. Yeah. So we suddenly just had 20 boards on the patch. Yeah. They're only a few weeks in, and our faces were just suddenly in the patch. And it just meant that we just had phone call after phone call of sometimes just good PR chats, ultimately. So although I was apprehensive when we did it, I'm so glad we did. Yeah. And then the feedback that we've had from clients is all been positive. Yeah. That they felt that, well, we know who we're texting, because we've had a few people call or text off the board. And they go, actually, it was quite nice because there's the board. You then know who's turning up. They might have seen the listing online and we're on the video as well. Yep. And it just helps with this continuity of this one person who's going to help you move. But something that I was reasonably apprehensive about. I'm so glad we did. Yeah. So glad we did.
They look really good. And I think it's nice to hear that actually, because again, it's a conversation we've not had since, but it's interesting to hear that personal brand is building trust through those touch points, which is ultimately what we're all about with the marketing style at Avocado, is how many different familiarity touch points can we create for the client, future client, if you like, so that ultimately you get an uncontested bit of business, which is it's great to hear. This might be a question which is down the line a little bit as you're still kind of building everything out, but you have had a really, really strong kind of 9 months with listings, quality of listings, pipeline completions already, as you mentioned. But have you had any thought around financial strategy and how you're going to use the business to almost build wealth in time to come? Because let's say you do this for 10 years, for example, what are you trying to utilize the business for from a personal life point of view? And do you feel that you can do that better now being a business owner than you could employed?
Yeah, 100%. And although, it's a bit premature to be actioning on any of these things, the thoughts that I'm having at the moment There's loads.
Yeah.
There's a few things with Ovi that we've been talking about. Right, if we got to this point, because being self-employed, it only makes sense to take a certain amount of money out of the company each month ultimately. Yeah. So hopefully, as time goes on, there will be a bigger and bigger buffer left there that we can then look at what we're doing. And we've had conversations about buying property up north, ultimately utilising that money to reinvest it in a buy-to-let. We've also said if we got to a point where we had enough and a really good flip came on, we'd look at it.
Yeah.
So many things like that you just, when you're living or when you're working employed in an estate agent, you can only earn so much.
Yeah.
Even if you're uncapped. Realistically, if you went and knocked it totally out of the park, the owners of the company would change your pay structure if you totally went out of control and just totally double turnover. They'd go, oh, we'll scale that back. So there's never such thing as totally in control, uncapped.
Yeah,
I don't believe.
No.
Where here it is ultimately. If you go and do more and more and more, you are going to have more access, and it's yours. You're in control. You can decide what you do with that. And I know other partners have spoken about cash investments, speaking to financial advisors, and that's ultimately where we would like to get to once we've got the pot built up.
Yeah, I mean, we've got monthly records, well, tomorrow actually, we've got our kind of 2025 kickoff meeting. We've got the biggest year that a duo's ever done, the solo record for a year broken. The duo month was broken last month for a record month. The solo month was broken last month and we look at last year being a tougher market than what it was 3 years ago. All of these records, Avocado, uplift again, 21% increase on turnover in 2024 in comparison to 23. So everything's kind of moving in that direction. And what you just spoke about there, I think is really important for people to understand, because if you've got a sales-only estate agency business that you own, say you've got Ian Macbeth's estate agent in Crowthorne where I live, I've got a lot of costs, maybe 10 grand a month's worth of costs as an estate agent. And in 10 years' time, I might make some good money. Maybe I can sell that business for the pipeline of what it's worth, but not much more. Whereas if I'm Ian Macbeth, Avocado, self-employed agent, there's no reason why I can't stockpile 50 grand a year investment play money, as well as paying myself dividends and a salary and paying tax and VAT. There's no reason why I can't stockpile the money that you and Ovi are talking about. And in 10 years' time, there's £500,000 worth of cash sat there for investable money. That's actually a much better way of being an independent agent in my own right than actually starting my own brand on the high street. It's just simple economics, effectively. So what you're talking about is great. Is there any advice that you would give someone or people that are watching this video that are sat on the fence? They've got a bit of fear, or they want to do it, but they're a bit scared. What advice would you give to them that they should be doing now before?
I think in your employed role, look at all areas of estate agency. And what I mean by that is, obviously, the person that's probably thinking about it already goes out and values houses. I think that's probably a given, and will do that successfully. I think it's also include yourself in viewings as well. It's very easy to sit back in an employed role and let the negotiators go out and do the viewings, but I think you'll be known by more people by going out and doing the viewings, and also being involved in sales progression.
Yeah.
That is where I believe you make a real name for yourself. It's something that I always really enjoyed. So even in an employed role, I would stay involved with that. And it's the part you get paid on, which is obviously the best bit. But I would stay included in that, because people remember the problem solver who, when it was all stuck and no one knew which way to turn, they would do that. Now, if you're spending the next 6 months, year, 18 months, being the complete agent, doing the valuation, doing viewings, and then getting involved on the sales progression, I think when you then go to join and be on your own, people will remember you as the estate agent that helped them, not just one cog of perhaps a team of 5. So just try and take ownership, I think, of the ones you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Because I think that will pay dividends later down the line.
Stay on the tools, stay all-rounded. So do you think actually self-employed agents, if you're working at a big corporate or an independent, the best place for that person to be, if in a year's time they want to be a self-employed agent, is actually a smaller office as a BM with a small team where they do a bit of everything, in comparison to being that paper pusher kind of desk branch manager that's no longer client-facing, that's actually more a bit of a fireman putting out fires, bit of a recruiter, one-to-one kind of reporter. It's actually interesting. That's what you're saying, is actually the former rather than the latter is actually the best place to be before you go self-employed.
I mean, I think so, but that's because that's what
I
was.
Yeah. That makes sense. I agree with you. Yeah.
And I used to see, this was just years ago, this is going back, from being reasonably young in a estate agency, you would see certain people be the paper pusher style, and when the market turned, they would be the ones that got let go. They would be the big salaries that ultimately got told to go. So even before self-employed estate agency was really on anyone's radar, I remember thinking, when we worked together previously, I remember being almost scared of being too far progressed and out of customer eye line, because I thought you'll earn a certain amount, you'll get to a certain lifestyle, market will change, you'd be first to go, is how I believed it could happen, and I saw it happen, and you saw it happen to other people as well.
Yeah.
And I remember that maybe at like 21, 22, seeing that and thinking, I don't actually ever want to be too far away from being on the tools, so to speak, because I wanted to be on customer eye line, because then I think you can say, this is what I bring in.
Yeah.
So in answer to your question, yes, slightly biased because that's what I did, but I also did that intentionally because I was always cautious that so many estate agents get to a certain point where
they're not estate agents.
They're not estate agents. And then the market turns, it gets tricky, and they get told, actually, we're going to do this without you.
Yeah.
And that
is a great point. I mean, I use my personal example that prior to Avocado, I'd spent 16 years at the same place. 12 of those years, I wasn't an estate agent. I was a area manager, director. I was a manager, a trainer, a recruiter, a firefighter. Wasn't really client facing unless there was a major complaint. So when I went into Avocado and kicked everything off, although I'd spent 16 years working as an agent in Bracknell, I had no personal brand. No one knew who I was from the public side. Not really, a couple of people here and there from back in the day, but I wasn't really a known entity through the public. I was known for all of the estate agents locally, but I wasn't known to the public. So had I have been on the tools for those 12 years, I reckon it would have probably been even easier to kick off. And I had to use my marketing skills and the personal brand and the change of direction that Avocado was to take to our advantage. But there was no former clients coming back to me and going, you did this, Y and Z, like you said. So it's a really good point that I haven't actually thought about, that is great advice for people listening. And if you are watching this video and you're sat on the fence about doing this, then have a chat with Matt, because he's right in the thick of year 1 at the moment. And I can't remember how many years you've done it before, 11, 12?
Yeah, 12 years.
12 years prior. Yeah. So, real seasoned career in estate agency. But as you said, you were kind of sat in the background thinking, I want to do this. Time wasn't quite right. It fell into motion quite nicely, which was fortunate because of the situation with the person who had the license previously, which may not have happened. It did, which was great. But there'll be people out there thinking, I don't want to lose my patch. So have a chat with Matt, have a chat with me. Thanks for watching the video. Some great advice and tips there, and good luck getting through the rest of year 1.
Thank you very much.